This is truly the trip that changed my life. Everything I was doing with a camera up to that point was completely inadequate. But when I told people that that's what I wanted to do, you can imagine what they said. That's nice, Benji. Get a backup plan. When I graduated, I had a very big decision to make. Start my business as a photographic artist, the impossible path. I came home to Bristol. Well, of course, we're celebrating our 10-year anniversary, but this started way before then. When I was 6 years old, I received my first camera by sending off proofs of purchases from the back of a cereal box. I'm sure Kodak was behind this because you give a kid a camera and he's going to use a lot of film. And I remember I was straight up a tree in our yard taking photographs of a mother dove sitting on top of her nestlings, and I brought that photograph in once we got the film back, brought that in to show Mom, and I was off to the races. It was whatever adventure I could find in our neighborhood, taking those photographs, sharing them with Mom, and growing from there. My father was an incredible outdoorsman. He loved to fish and to hunt, and so as early as I can possibly remember, I was out with him. And the thing about Dad is he spent an incredible amount of time outside, and so I became unusually comfortable, let's say, spending time in the wilderness and sitting literally by myself. What I started to really notice and pick up on was the changes of the light and just the feeling and the emotion of the natural world. Fast forward to my high school years, and photography for me really became a way for me to express what I was falling in love with. I was always out in nature with my buddies. We were doing hikes on the AT and the Virginia Creeper Trail and all the trails within a 2-hour radius of my hometown of Bristol. And those images became a way that I could share the things that I had found. This incredible cliff face, or this incredible mountain, or the vista, or the bear, or the deer, or whatever I'd come across. And it gave my words a lot of validity. And I started to realize the power of an image. So fast forward on to my college years. I'm an Appalachian State University graduate, and at App State, not only was I cutting my teeth as a photographic artist, but as an entrepreneur, because I started doing something very unusual. I took a photograph, and instead of sending them or sharing them, I put them on the wall as a poster, and I started selling my posters right off my dorm room wall. And I had a pretty good setup, so my roommate was the RA. So everybody in the dorm had to come check in with the RA at some point. And while they were in, I would hit them up and say, hey, would you like one of these posters for your dorm room wall? So that's really how all of this began, or until it got really hard. What made me crazy enough to think that I could take photographs and sell them as art? And that's actually one of the toughest questions to answer. But I know that it has roots in the time that I spent in Australia and New Zealand. So my sophomore year of college, I actually studied my butt off and applied to get the one spot out of 14,000 students at Appalachian State University to exchange in Australia. So I switched places with an Australian student. All I had to do was come up with money for a plane ticket. So I went begging my folks, and of course they helped me with that. And I was in Australia. And this is truly the trip that changed my life, in the fact that it opened my mind to the fact that, little me, as this average American, had the ability to be halfway around the world, just really immersed in another land, a foreign land. And I tested my skills on, hey, could I create photographs in this place halfway around the world? And could I create them in a way that embodied the emotion of this foreign destination and express that to people? The other key thing that happened in Australia is, for the first time, I went into museums in Melbourne and Sydney and Brisbane, and I started seeing photographs on the wall as art. And I'd never seen that before. And granted, these were not nature-based images. These were architectural images or nudes or abstracts or whatever they may have been. But nonetheless, there's a photograph on the wall as art. And this is what I'd already started doing in my dorm room back at Appalachian State. But I thought, wow, I want to create big art. I want to create things that have this emotional impact. And for me, the oil paintings that I would see all had scale and girth. So it hit me like a ton of bricks that everything I was doing with a camera up to that point was completely inadequate for the vision that I ultimately had. And again, that vision was to create a strong emotional impact with the viewer. And I, at that moment, really knew that scale was the way. Size really did matter in this instance. So that's the technical quest. But the quest as an artist also began on that fateful trip to Australia and New Zealand. And that's really embodied in the story of Original Blues. I'm studying in Australia, and a buddy of mine and I start chatting about the incredible hikes on the South Island of New Zealand. So we take off after our classes are finished, and we go to the South Island of New Zealand in quest of these beautiful landscapes. Another place that completely blows me away. I'm taking photographs left and right. We get down to the South Island. We do a couple of the most famous hikes in the world. And basically, I'm coming down to my last days on my first international trip. And we go into this long 3.5 day, nearly 4 day hike into the backcountry. And as we're coming back into town, I come across this little jetty, this little dock that's going out into the water. Oh, by the way, the previous 3 or 4 days, we had frozen our butts off. We had been rained on, we had been sleeted on, and we were under-equipped, under-prepared. It was high in the mountains, and we'd come back into this little town. I find myself at this jetty, and the sun pops out. It was beautiful, and I felt the first warmth on my shoulders that I had felt in days. The next day, I had to get on a plane to fly back home. 6 months I'd been away from home, my first international trip. You can imagine that this is an emotional moment. And I promised myself at 20 years old that I would make my way back there and take a photograph and try to capture that emotion. And that's a pretty big promise to make to yourself as a 20-year-old. So I went home and I finished out my last couple years in school at Appalachian State University. And in that time, I was pondering this inspiration that I had felt. I knew that I was supposed to take photographs and try this crazy dream that was baked in my head of showing those photographs as art in museums and galleries. But when I told people that that's what I wanted to do, you can imagine what they said. That's nice, Benji. You know, get a backup plan is what I heard a lot of. So I actually took that very seriously, and I really did get a backup plan. I took my studies very seriously. I studied business, I studied tourism, and my backup plan was quite literally to have an adventure travel or luxury travel company, because I knew at that point that my purpose was to connect people to nature, and I knew that if I failed as a photographic artist, at least I could connect people by taking them into the field so that they could experience the things that I had seen with my own eyes. But that's not how it started. When I graduated, I had a very big decision to make. Start my business as a photographic artist, the impossible path, or do I start a business where I have a travel company, a travel brand, which just seems so much more feasible and responsible. And I actually chose to be an artist. And it was so tough at first. It's hard for me to over-exaggerate how hard it was at the beginning of all of this. Quite literally, it was 7 years, not months, of beans and ramen noodles to save money for film, of sleeping on sofas, of not knowing how I was going to pay the next bill, of working odd jobs, of flipping houses, of anything I could do to get on that next trip so that I could create more work and so that ultimately I could share that work. You have to understand that along this time, I actually was able to be recognized by a number of international awards and museums, and it still wasn't paying the bills. And so I had to nurture the dream that there was a dream at the beginning of all this. And it was really, really tough. In fact, there's a whole 7-year period there before I ever opened the Benjamin Walls Gallery right here in downtown Bristol. And I think that made me a little tougher, a little grittier, and it made me better. It made me sharper in the field, because I truly believe that the most finite of detail could make the difference between someone's casual interest and someone actually collecting a piece. So I just went overboard with detail and with honing my craft and getting better at what I was doing. And slowly but surely, I built up a collector base. I had a number of galleries that started representing my work. I came home to Bristol and decided to open my first gallery where my roots were. And again, you might call me crazy, but that's where it started. Bristol. So yeah, a lot of people ask. In fact, the number one question that folks ask in the Bristol Gallery is, why is this here? I take it as a total compliment. I'm so proud to have started my first gallery in Bristol. Like many things, necessity is the mother of invention. And at the time, I was selling images in different galleries, and I was struggling with the accurate representation of who I was as an artist, the stories I wanted to tell. My passion for conservation wasn't coming through in those galleries because it wasn't really important. They wanted to sell something. I just felt lost in translation. So I wanted to start my own gallery. I wanted to have a signature gallery with just my work so that I could really share my story, share what my work was all about, share things in the scale and the size, and not be hemmed in creatively. And of course, that's a big dream. Where do you start with that, right? So my sister was just starting a boutique in our hometown of downtown Bristol, and she said, you know, you should take a look at Bristol. To be honest, before she said it, I just didn't consider it. When I was growing up, downtown was boarded up and vacant. Wasn't much happening, but I was really pleasantly surprised when I came back to downtown and I saw this little spark of folks that were developing loft apartments, folks that had opened a couple of restaurants and retail spaces, and I thought, you know, this could work. And so I walked down the street with my sister and I said, you know, if I could own any building in town, I'd take that corner building right there. And I think she thought I was crazy. She was encouraging, of course, and that's because this building didn't look like that back in 2008 when we were having this conversation. The structural floor inside had collapsed. There was no proper plumbing. The electricity barely worked. It was basically a condemned structure, but I was enamored with the visibility of the corner, and I thought, well, if downtown Bristol continues to come back, and if I have a presence here, why not be in the middle of everything? And I think this huge project is going to be worth it. So I went to the banks, I lined up my big plans for loft apartments on the second floor and the gallery on the first floor, and no one really thought that you could rent lofts for what I said they could, or that a gallery would do well enough to pay for the renovations that I wanted to do. So I took what they were willing to give, and I thought, well, I'll get the apartments finished upstairs first, and then once I see how amazing that is, I'll be able to go back to the bank and get more money. I'll finish out the gallery. It'll be beautiful. But there was a problem. 2008, we all know and are very familiar with the Great Recession, and that kicked me right in the teeth like it did a lot of people that had just closed on property. And I found myself, instead of hiring out a lot of things, swinging hammers myself. And so I spent nearly 3 years of work from the time I originally saw the building to the time that I opened in October of 2010, working myself inside along. I had some good help as well, but I did a lot of the work myself. There was really no other option. Here we were, mired in recession. The galleries that I had sold out of up until that point, a lot of them went out of business. I was selling very few pieces of artwork. I was struggling to get by. My parents helped me. I resorted to taking photographs at weddings and portraits. I had nothing against that, but it's just not what was in my soul. But I had to do what I had to do to get by and get the gallery finished. So on October 16th, 2010, my friends at the Paramount Theater hosted a little gathering here in the Bristol Gallery. We weren't finished. There were very few images on the wall, but we had a few folks into the gallery, and I told the first stories about my work right here in downtown Bristol, and it was a humble start. But slowly and surely, more sales came in, more people came to the gallery. Our first wall signature event right here in the gallery, I sent out invitations to everybody I knew and got a mailing list and all this other stuff. I think 12 people came to the event that evening, and I'm pretty sure 8 of them were my close friends or relatives. So it was a humble beginning and a humble start. But as I watched the needle move month after month and year after year, I knew that I could make something more. And I used it as an opportunity to be in the field, to perfect my craft. And when I had some opportunities early on to maybe open a second gallery or to be represented by a bigger gallery, I actually paused on that, not because I was afraid of it, but because I knew that the quality of the work that I was producing wasn't absolutely impeccable. It was really, really good, but I was onto some new technology, and I knew if I really wanted to take things to the next level, not only did I need to start creating work in that fashion, but I needed to do it in-house. The next quest began. So yes, 2014 was another great year. We had grown again, and I had a lot of opportunities, but instead of chasing them, other gallery representation, the possibility of opening a second gallery, I actually decided to really hit pause. And you have to understand, this isn't because I didn't believe in myself. This isn't because I wasn't scared. This is because I was very confident of what we could actually do as a team, what I could do as an artist. I had that vision, but I knew that there were a couple things that just were not right. Number one, I knew that even though every collector was totally thrilled with their work, even though we were producing work that was on the wall that people were thrilled by, I still knew that I could make it just that much better. So I dove into the technology of actually melding an old technology of a silver halide photograph with a new technology of museum-grade acrylic and face mounting. I thought this was the best way, and I still believe it's the best way to produce a photograph that is vibrant, lifelike, archival, and has spectacular quality. So instead of chasing other opportunities, I actually purchased a warehouse near downtown Bristol, and I put all of the production in this larger area where we could actually expand our production capability. And this is kind of insane because I'm selling in this little gallery in downtown Bristol and very humbly producing work. And I could have easily kept up with that demand with our little production studio in the back of the gallery. So totally went big with the production facility. And also I scrapped everything that we were doing that we had been finding success on up until that point. All of it's out the window. We're going to start with this new process. It's going to be better, and we're going to have an expanded capacity. And this was a long journey. From 2015 really through 2018, I was perfecting the process. I was perfecting those perfectly mounted images and building the team that could produce the work and purchasing the equipment so everything was in-house. And then it was time for the next step. Obviously, we're walking a lot of parallel paths here. So one of the things that's happening in the local Bristol community is, folks have caught on to, hey, Benjamin Wall's gallery is selling some really nice and rather expensive artwork. If Benji will donate a piece, that'll help us raise money for all the very worthy charities that we have in the Tri-Cities and in Bristol in particular. And it started to unlock my mind to the power of being able to raise funds for a very worthy cause. And then 2013, the Kickstarter project, Tiger Now, Tiger Never. Really, this was a funding campaign more to get me there to actually photograph the tigers than it was to do any kind of substantial good for the tigers. It was becoming very clear to me that I could use my work in this platform that I was building to really influence and raise funds for things that I cared about. Because it wasn't just my work, it was the people that believed in my work, and the funds that it was garnering had a lot of power. And I'd always believed that, but this was validation, this was proof of concept, and even though it was in its most minuscule form, raising money for the nonprofits and charities in Bristol, and then raising money in order to travel and see the tigers and capture the tigers and share that with an audience, that ultimately gave me the confidence and the vision, kept growing with regards to things like, hey, let's raise money for the last northern white rhinos, or hey, yes, I do believe I could raise some money for the Jane Goodall Institute and the chimpanzee conservation that Jane's doing. And so when those opportunities came my way, I didn't hesitate. I knew that I had assembled a team and a portfolio of work, and I could articulate why these places were so important. But there was a bit of a missing element, and that was the deep emotional connection that comes with actual experience. And what was happening in the gallery was people were coming in and they were being inspired by my work, and they were asking questions about all of these things, and that gave me this platform to share. But there were certain folks that were wanting to go even deeper, and they were actually wanting to go into the field. And so this is the point where I threw back to my college education, to my study of business and tourism. And it was even a tip of the cap to the naysayers who said, well, you'll never make it as an artist, you better get a backup plan. Well, if you remember, my backup plan was actually to design a luxury travel company. So in 2016, we launched our very first trip. 2015, I announced it. at our 5-year anniversary, and I said that for our 5-year birthday, I've decided to take you to Africa, and then underlined "no, really," and sent this out to my collector base. And Walls About Luxury Travel was born, and it gave me another platform to be able to take people on these incredible vacations and actually see some of the things that they could see in the gallery, but see them in person. Looking back, of course, now people see that Walls About and the Benjamin Walls Gallery and my artwork work very nicely as a symbiotic relationship. But you have to understand that this was a creative risk. I consider myself an artist first. I've always made the decision to be an artist despite what other opportunities I had, and I didn't want to degrade or undermine the validity of my artwork or the quality of my work. So when I started Walls About, I didn't want that to interfere. And it was a bit of a risk because I didn't know how that would be taken by my collectors. I didn't know what criticism would come my way. But all I really knew is I had to follow my North Star, and that was emotionally connect people to the natural world. And I knew that it was going to get deeper if I could take them into the field on a beautiful luxury safari and a beautiful vacation, because at that point they're totally relaxed and they're able to really experience and absorb the incredible world that I had come to know so intimately, but do it for themselves. And this was the point where Walls About Luxury Travel and the Benjamin Walls Gallery started operating side by side, and it gave me even more confidence, and it told me even more so that we were ready in 2018 for the next big step. 2018, everything's going the right direction. The gallery's had its best year ever. Walls About Luxury Travel's up and running. The first safari participants have told their friends who's told their friends, and it's growing, and we've got more trips on the books. And it's time for the next gallery. Quite literally had feelers out all around the country, but I kept going back to Asheville, North Carolina. I'd always loved Asheville. It felt very much like home. It was the Southern Appalachian. I did my undergraduate work at Appalachian State University in Western North Carolina, and I worked summer camps in Asheville. So I knew it very well, and I decided Asheville's the place. Got an apartment in downtown Asheville, and I went on a quest to find the next gallery location. And you have to understand that we were ready, but I couldn't find the space. And this does come back a little bit to the fact that I'm picky, but it also comes back to timing. And yet again, my timing was poor. 2018, Asheville's absolutely booming. There are no places for rent. And so I literally started knocking on doors. What could I lease? What could I potentially buy? I didn't want to go through another massive renovation project. I wanted to get open. And I felt like the opportunity was right, but just couldn't come up with the space. So from the time I started knocking on doors, in fact, one of the very first conversations that I had, my initial search before I even moved to Asheville, was in late 2017, and then the time that we actually opened the gallery in Asheville was mid to late 2019. And so 2 full years between knocking on doors and actually opening the gallery. So another complete challenge. Timing wasn't perfect with regards to hitting such a strong market, but we were open. One marathon to the next, and Asheville, the search for the building is complete. The lease is signed, grand opening. We have a bit of a hit on our hands, but it's not perfect. I was operating a small gallery in Bristol. There's a lot of missing systems, processes. We're constantly trying to improve, stabilize everything, and we're kind of off to the races. I had actually circled late March of 2020 on the calendar as the time when sales would really start coming back, because obviously in the winter it's rather slow. I'd built this big team, I'd kept everybody employed, and I thought, when I see the flowers budding in March of 2020, I will have known at that moment, I will have been able to know that we're stable and growing and off to the race. And then something happened that we all know. In March of 2020, the whole world shut down. And here we are, celebrating our 10-year anniversary, and this cloud is still on us. But I can tell you, and if you've taken the time to listen to me ramble on about this story, I don't know if there's ever ideal timing for anyone, and it certainly hasn't been the case for me, but I definitely know that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So beyond COVID, we obviously don't know for sure, but my prediction is that we survive, things come back, and we thrive. I'm as passionate as ever about my work about conservation, about my incredibly talented and exceptional team, about Walls About Luxury Travel, and about my latest baby, Walls Wine Bar, which is located in the Asheville Gallery only. We're going to continue our march forward, and I'm going to stand on the past and that each tough step has made me sharper. It's made my companies better. And so we're going to use this as an opportunity. We're going to stay optimistic. And before we do any of that, by gosh, we're going to celebrate, because it's been 10 bloody years of business in downtown Bristol. But right now, I would like to take this opportunity to say thank you to the many people over the years that have made this happen. Whether you're an art collector, a Walls About traveler, an incredible team member that is either with us or is no longer with us, you all have all come together to support the vision of a crazy artist, and I don't even have words, and if I even think about it too much, I'll melt into the floor, because I'm so very thankful and grateful for your support. Thank you. We will survive. We will keep going, and I can't wait to see you in the gallery, even if you have to have your mask on, and beyond, very soon.